Hi, Roy here, and welcome once again to another edition of the Right Has Left podcast. I am your host, Roy Garten, and as each and every week, it's a pleasure to be with you as we cuss and discuss and dissect the news from this past week. And almost all of it, with the exception of a few stories, kind of focuses on the Trump administration and or his cabinet and the things that they're doing. So having said that, let's go ahead and get right into it. And what I'm going to be discussing starting right off is going to be my top story. And that is, of course, the ongoing crisis in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I do call it a crisis because each and every week it seems like some tragic event happens, and it's kind of sad. So we are going to start off with what was going on with a 5-year-old boy who was taken into custody, also with his father, by ICE agents. And if you are not familiar with this 5-year-old little boy, it's just tragic, and he's also kind of used as a pawn. His name is Ian Ramos, and what happened is it just happened this past Tuesday. Local officials say it is the latest instance of heightened federal immigration enforcement in the state of Minnesota. The family of a 5-year-old Ian Cazello Ramos was detained this past Tuesday, as I just mentioned, as part of the federal government's ongoing immigration crackdown. The family had a pending asylum case, but absolutely zero order of deportation directing that they be removed from the United States. In other words, folks, the family was here legally. Officials at the high school said in a statement that the 5-year-old was apprehended by immigration officials shortly after arriving home from preschool while his father was in their driveway. The official said the lawyers alleged Department of Homeland Security is denying legal counsel to Minnesota detainees. And there was another adult that was living in the house. That adult, whose name has not been released, agreed to take care of the 5-year-old, and the ICE agent said, no, that's not going to happen, and they took him. Pretty sad. The officials at the school said the agent took the child out of the still-running vehicle, led him to the door, and then directed him to knock on the door. This is where, again, using him as a pawn, as asking him to be let in to see if anybody else is in the house. In other words, they were looking to see if anybody else is in that home illegal. So instead of the ICE agents, breaking in the door, which I'm going to get into a story about that a little bit later, they use this 5-year-old, say, hey, knock on the door and see if anybody else is there. And of course, the little 5-year-old, he's innocent, and he went ahead and did that. And so, he's basically bait. The father and child are both in government custody right now as this story is ongoing. So to bring this all up to speed and up to date, the child was basically be used as a bait. Now, before I went on with this podcast and started taping this podcast, the ICE officials and the people that were involved with it had a press conference. And, of course, they put their own little spin on it, as they always do. The child is in great care now. We can take care of this child better than the probably people in the house could. And we don't know what their status is. And, we always are taking care of children, when they are picked up and seeing that they're fed. And we try to reunite them with the family as soon as it's feasibly possible. And blah, 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 of course. And, Kristi Noem, she, of course, she defends what happened, and, the people were there illegally, which they weren't. It sadly just goes on and on and on. So, first we have, innocent people getting shot and in the head and killed. And now you've got 5-year-old children in the bitter cold, drug out. There was another one on a guy in video, drug out in the freezing temperatures in his underwear. these people, state police is what they are, secret police of the Trump administration. It's no longer just rounding up people who are what they were supposed to round up, the so-called fugitives, the insane people with felony records. They are just rounding up anybody and everything that looks like it's got brown skin on it. And that's exactly what's going on. So what does Trump do? He sends J.D. Vance to Minnesota to try to quiet things down with all of the protests that are going on. And so he feels that perhaps, I'll send my boy up there. He'll take care of things. So there was supposed to be a protest today, but it's so sub-freezing right now in Minnesota, they just told people to stay home as a way of protest and not show up for work and keep the shops closed and the stores closed and just stay home. And so that's what they're trying to do. So people are afraid to even go down the streets now in Minnesota. Now, as you're well aware of, the ICE has now moved into the state of Maine. Again, they're going to all the blue states. I guess the red states, there's no problem with immigration in the blues in the red states. Everything is fine there. But here in Florida, which is a red state, ICE is down here, specifically in the Miami area. So how that works is the districts that seem to have little splashes of blue, like parts of Miami, parts of Orlando. Well, ICE is going into those little areas and cleaning that up. In fact, they have just been looking at a huge warehouse in the city of Orlando to make that as another detention facility for the people that they round up. They're rounding up 3,000 immigrants a day. That's their goal. The goal is to get everybody out of the United States of America that hasn't got white skin or is white privilege. That's what they're really trying to do. They're saying it's for the security of the United States, but folks, what we've seen so far, and everybody who has been on media has been saying the same thing. They've overstepped their bounds. But let's get back to J.D. Vance. So he was in Minneapolis on Thursday to put the tone of local officials to turn down the temperature in Minneapolis. In other words, come on, folks, just bring it down a notch here. We're okay. Things are going to be fine. Let's let these people do these jobs. Earlier, Ice Barbie and J.D. Vance, when they were talking about the unfortunate, in their words, shooting of the 35-year-old woman in Minneapolis, before they were saying that she was a terrorist and all that. Now they brought that rhetoric and tone down. Now they're saying it was unfortunate this happened, but Ice Barbie, it was unfortunate, but the agents were just doing their job. It's sad this happened, but they stopped calling them terrorists and radicals, left people. They're now starting to say we're sorry, but anyway. So that's why J.D. Vance went to Minneapolis to try to tone down things. Now, he was flanked by federal law enforcement officers. The vice president said he spoke with immigration agents and local business leaders ahead of talking to the press, but he had not spoken with the state's governor, Tim Walz. I'm sure Walz doesn't want to have a damn thing to do with him, and neither does the mayor of Minneapolis. He said local officials should be helping ICE identify and arrest violent criminals. Again, hear that key word? Violent criminals. The 5-year-old boy and his father are violent criminals, aren't they? Mm-hmm. So, so the operation can be more targeted. Right now, they're just trying to go out and find whoever they can. So if you just help us target those people, we won't have to arrest everybody else and drag them out of their homes. So that's what J.D. Vance wants. A funny, I shouldn't call it funny, but something that happened there. J.D. Vance wound up, while he was in Minneapolis, firing one of his Secret Service agents because that particular Secret Service agent was talking to a woman, and he was, in fact, giving out the entire detail and agenda of what J.D. Vance was going to be doing that day, which, of course, is classified information. And it's absolutely crazy. I have the same kind of a story when I was a broadcast journalist myself. I'm going way back when I was a much younger man, but I was with the White House Press Corps as an independent news journalist covering President Bush, and in the hotel where we were at, some Secret Service agent left papers out on the counter that had the complete seating arrangements on Marine One where everybody was sitting. And we, of course, turned to, there was somebody else with me, by the way. So we of course, turned that into the Secret Service and said, this was just laying out here in the hotel lobby on a table. I'm sure you'd want that. So, yeah, it can happen. But this guy, unfortunately, wound up losing his job. So, again, the Minneapolis mayor and the governor really don't have too much to say to J.D. Vance. But he went in there to try to calm things down. They stopped the rhetoric. They're starting to tone down the rhetoric, but it hasn't changed anything. The thing is still going as status quo, but they're trying to talk to the media in a much more sublime word and using language that's a little bit subdued. And when incidences do happen, they're trying to say, we're sorry. We didn't, we feel for the people. It's unfortunate these things are happening, but we know we have a job to do. At least they're not calling them left-wing radicals anymore and calling them names and calling them, terrorists and stuff like that. So it's going to hopefully get a little better, right? Right. So moving on to the U.S. Department of Defense, and of course, who we're talking about there when we're talking about the U.S. Department of Defense. Yeah, Pete Hegseth. That guy that's rah, macho man. Well, he's ordered 1,500 active duty soldiers from the 11th Airborne Division in Alaska to prepare for a potential deployment to Minnesota if things don't calm down. That's why J.D. Vance puts there. Now, if you don't calm things down, if the protests don't stop, we're bringing in the military next. And the only way they can do that, as you're well aware of, is with the Insurrection Act. Which was, started in 1908. Now, that's what the president has to use to deploy the U.S. military on our own soil here. Like what happened January 6th when they stormed the Capitol. Yeah, I could have used the military there. But, for people who are protesting, that's the next step. Now, they haven't been sent, but they need to get ready, according to Pete Hegseth. So it's because of the intense ongoing protests in Minnesota and Minneapolis specifically. And ICE agents, of course, their activity cannot be interfered with. That's what Pete is saying. If it does continue to be interfered with, the troops are going to arrive. So what we got here is 2 infantry battalions from the 11th Airborne Division based in Alaska. They have received the prepare to deploy orders. The goal, of course, is for troops to be on standby and to depart on a minute's notice if they have to go to Minneapolis, Minnesota. And like I said, there's only one way that can happen, the Insurrection Act. So, again, this is all because of the protests, and people are getting sick and tired of ICE going around just dragging people out of their homes, harassing little children, shooting women in the head, that kind of stuff. It's getting pretty sad. And Walz and Fry, the governor and the mayor of Minneapolis, they are just getting a little sick and tired of it. But, again, no decision has been made about deploying those troops, but it can perhaps happen. Now, this brings me to the next part of this podcast before I change the topic matter here. This next item that I want to talk about is scary as all hell. And when I say scary as all hell, you got to think about this. Everybody has their Fourth Amendment rights. And as you're well aware of, most people, in fact, law enforcement officers, the FBI, I don't care. They cannot enter the privacy of your home or your domicile without a court order. It's called a search warrant, and that is typically issued by a judge. Now, somebody released this document, and of course, the Department of Homeland Security and ICE Barbie will not comment on it, but the press got a hold of it. So here you go. Federal immigration officers, and I say this with kid gloves, if that's what you want to call them, federal immigration officers, ICE, Well, of course, they are asserting sweeping powers to forcibly enter people's homes without a judge's warrant, according to an internal Immigration and Customs Enforcement memo, which was obtained by the Associated Press, marking a sharp reversal of long-standing guidance meant to respect constitutional limits on government searches. Now, the memo authorizes ICE officers to use force to enter a residence based solely on a more narrow administrative warrant to arrest someone with a final order of removal. Now, it's a move that advocates collides with the Fourth Amendment protections and upends years of advice which has been given to immigrant communities. The shift comes as the Trump administration dramatically expands immigration arrests nationwide, deploying thousands of officers under a mass deportation campaign that is already reshaping tactics in cities such as Minneapolis. Now, the Democrats on Capitol Hill immediately began sounding the alarm over the ICE directive. Senator Richard Blumenthal on Wednesday called for Homeland Security Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons to testify before Congress about the memo. That hasn't happened yet. Blumenthal also sent a letter to chairs of the State Homeland Security Committee, the Judiciary Committee, asking them to immediately call for the testimony following a shocking anonymous whistleblower disclosure. So what you have here is this so-called door knocker warrant that they can just walk in and bust through the door and come in. This document was found in a training exercise as they're training new ICE agents, and this is what they're now teaching these new ICE agents is this particular warrant scenario. The administrative warrant allows you to go into a home, anybody's school, anybody's office, without needing a judge's warrant, as we have typically seen. You can just bust in the door and go in, and they're teaching these new recruits this particular method. And that's why this was leaked. It is unconstitutional. But they don't give a damn. As I have reported earlier on these podcasts, a lot of these ICE agents don't even have a freaking high school education. They have zero training in law enforcement. They don't know jack about the law. All they know is they're giving a Glock, they are giving a protective vest, they are given a federal badge, and go get 'em, boy or girl. And that's what it is. Round up 3,000 people a day. We don't care how you do it, when you do it. We want you to get 3,000 people with brown skin a day. Please go out there and do that. And, as I said, they don't have to be people that have been federally charged. They don't have to be, people who have mental asylum. They don't have to be, pedophiles or whatever. Just go get them, and we'll figure it out later. Once you get them in, detain them, put them in a detention facility. We'll figure all that out later. Just, meet the quota. You guys got billions of dollars that Congress passed in that big, beautiful bill to do this. We know that money we sucked out from Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and, Obamacare. All that money is now in there. So you go do what you want to do. And on top of that, if you can get like 10 people a day, we're going to give you a $3,000 bonus. Now, you think I'm making that BS up? It's on tape. It has been taped by people who are covering arrests. These agents talking about that. They get bonuses if they get so many people arrested, over their quota. And they love that bonus. I mean, some of these agents, man, they're knocking down, $6,000, $7,000, in a pop. And that's why so many people are jumping on the bandwagon to join ICE. They don't care what they got to do. The money, man, the money is great. So, yeah. So anyway, the Connecticut senator also sent a letter Wednesday to Norman Lyons, writing in that memo, asserting that immigration officers have the sweeping power should appall every American. Every American should be terrified by this secret ICE policy authorizing its agents to kick down your door and storm into your home, and saying it's legally and morally okay to do so, which it isn't. But again, and I can go on and on about this particular document. It just makes me sick to my stomach. But the bottom line is, there is nobody in Congress that will do jack shit. about this because they're scared to death of Donald Trump. The Democrats have no power, and if they did try, they're threatened. And if any Republican tries it, they're threatened. It's just like on the news today. The House narrowly, but they did pass the bill and defeated this bill that was trying to say that Trump has no powers to go into the South America, into Argentina or Venezuela or anywhere else. They were trying to strip him of his war powers. And the Republicans defeated it. They said, you can go ahead and go into Venezuela with military all you want. Go for it if that's what it takes. Get that all. They have kissed the golden ring. They are scared. They've given up their souls to the American people. They're there for Donald Trump's beckoning. They don't want anything to do with the people they represent. They don't care about that. They care about making sure that they are in total favor with the Trump administration. The money that they make and the behind-the-scenes deals that they make that is more important to them and their families than the people that elected them office. They have totally forgot about you and I. That's basically the news on what's going on there with immigration. I know it is sad. It's scary. I feel for the children. But it's just going to get worse and worse because nobody's willing to do jack about it. They've got absolute power. You've seen that movie, Absolute Power? Here's an example of absolute power. When the United States is now an authoritarian country, run by state police and and state-controlled media pretty soon. So, there's not a dang thing you can do about it. Moving on to Jack Smith. As you know, Jack Smith has been called again to the Congressional Committee to be drilled by the Republicans to say how terrible person he is, and by the Democrats to get more transparency on exactly what happened with the charges against Donald Trump. So, now Jack is before these people. He's been standing his ground. He's been stalwart in repeating and stating exactly what and how things went down with the documents that Trump had in Mar-a-Lago. But, of course, the Republican lawmakers are grilling the former Justice Department counsel Jack Smith this past Thursday at a congressional hearing that's expected to focus fresh attention on two criminal investigations that shadowed Donald Trump during his 2024 presidential campaign. Now, Smith has testified behind closed doors last month, but returned to the House Judiciary Committee for a public hearing in front of the television cameras likely to divide along starkly partisan lines between Republican lawmakers looking to undermine the former Justice Department official and Democrats hoping to elicit new and damaging testimony about Trump's conduct. Smith will tell lawmakers that he stands behind his decision as special counsel to bring charges against Trump in separate cases, accusing the Republican of conspiracy to overturn the 2020 presidential election after he lost to Democrat Joe Biden, and hoarding classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach, Florida. Of course, we've already had some things that happen on that. The Republicans, they don't even try to question Jack Smith about anything with the documents. We saw these people on television just the other day, and these Republicans that were questioning him looked like idiots. They didn't ask hardly any questions specifically about the documents, about the January 6th insurrection. They didn't. All they did was belittle Jack Smith and tell them like what a terrible person he is, and that he is a crook, and that he had no business doing that, and he's not an American. And the Republicans were just sitting there going rah 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 for Donald Trump. That's what they're supposed to do, and did not even question him or try to do anything. Nor the Democrats did do deep dives and say, well, what about this document and what about this procedure? They're trying to bring to the American people exactly what happened. The Republicans didn't want to hear any of that. They're just like, hey, you terrible son of a bitch. And if I was in that office sitting in that chair, I would be just like, embarrassed. At least you got some people. There's still some Republicans that got a little bit of integrity. They're saying, this is, this shouldn't have gone down. And please tell us exactly what happened. But nope. Yeah, kind of crazy, isn't it? Yeah. All right, let's move on to the man himself, Donald Trump. And let's talk a little bit about, what was going on overseas in his little meeting that he was having with our European allies. And, of course, as you know, the deal with Greenland has kind of settled a little bit. As you know, earlier, Donald Trump was threatening to use military force to take Greenland. He called it Iceland a couple times. He couldn't get the two countries, figured out. But sometimes he called him Greenland, and other times he said Iceland. I don't think he knows what country he wants. But now we know military is not an option, and he said he has come to a behind-the-scenes somewhat of an agreement. We don't know what that is. He won't say what it is. That the United States can, have a free reign in Greenland. That's not true. I think Greenland offered to give them a little bit of some areas for military bases, which they already have one up there. But Greenland will remain a sovereign country, still controlled by Denmark. But he was asked to elaborate earlier on his comments, and he just said that, we'll figure it out. So the other thing that this gentleman did, President Donald Trump, of course, he has proposed a Board of Peace organization because he thinks the UN doesn't do anything. And this Board of Peace will be in charge of the Gaza Strip, underscoring what one national security analyst has described as a revision of the existing international order. Again, when Donald Trump was asked about this, he said there'll be some countries involved, but I can't elaborate exactly which ones. Before I move on a little bit about this meeting that he had, I don't know if let me run this one clip before I run another clip about what he said about Canada, but let me run this one clip first on Donald Trump when he was talking at this recent meeting. Watch.
We want strong allies, not seriously weakened ones. We want Europe to be strong. Ultimately, these are matters of national security, and perhaps no current issue makes the situation more clear than what's currently going on with Greenland. I have tremendous respect for both the people of Greenland and the people of Denmark, tremendous respect. But every NATO ally has an obligation to be able to defend their own territory. And the fact is, no nation or group of nations is in any position to be able to secure Greenland other than the United States.
Did you hear Donald Trump's voice? He sounds like a worried, tired old man, doesn't he? I mean, I know it's an overseas trip, and his Air Force One got turned around because of a maintenance problem. Maybe he's tired up there a little bit, but he just does not sound or look good lately, does he? But anyway, he just says the UN has not been very helpful, and he's a big fan of the UN, but he's never lived up to his potential, Trump said, thus creating this new council. While arguing that the UN should continue to exist, he said the UN should have settled every one of the wars that I personally have settled. Again, everything in the world is about Donald Trump. This man, he's a narcissist. He's got an ego. He's pompous. And if it isn't about him, and if the news is not him on a positive note, he gets upset, and he will literally do everything he can to destroy everybody. But as long as you talk favorably about him and tell everybody else what a great guy he is, and everything that he's done, then he's a happy camper. So anyway, again, President Donald Trump announced Thursday that Canada was no longer welcome to his newly established Board of Peace because Canada has not been very pleasant to him. Watch this clip.
Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
So Trump rescinded Canada's invitation, informing Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney that his country could no longer join the most prestigious board of leaders ever assembled. He actually said in Truth Social, "Dear Prime Minister Carney, please let this letter serve to represent that the Board of Peace is withdrawing its invitation to you regarding Canada's joining that will be probably the most prestigious board of leaders ever assembled at any time," Trump wrote, which of course he is appointed himself as the leader of that new group. Trump unveiled the board during a speech and signing ceremony Thursday at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, with leaders from Latin America, Europe, the Middle East, and Central and Southeast Asia all joining him on stage. Now, let me stop there real quick, because not those few countries that I mentioned, most of the European alliance do not want anything to do with this new so-called organization that Donald Trump is putting together. They're not happy with them. In fact, most of the European allies and NATO are pissed off at Trump over this Greenland thing. And they want nothing to do with this new organizational peace group to work in Gaza. One country that is absent is Palestine itself. He's putting together this big thing, this big group to take care of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. And, of course, Palestine has absolutely zero input about it. We're going to come in there and we're going to tell you how to put your country together. You mean Palestinians, again, because everybody is in bed with Israel. And of course, all the politicians are in bed with Israel because AIPAC pays them thousands and thousands of dollars to put in their pockets to do whatever they want to be in favor of Israel. And I've done a podcast about that. If you want to find out and think I'm full of BS, look up AIPAC. They actually got a website they brag about how much money they give to all the congressional people. Thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. There's very few politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, who have not accepted a penny from AIPAC. But again, that's why, this big organization being put together to tell the people of Palestine how we're going to run your country. So there was mixed international response and divided the allies, of course, as was to be expected. Trump signed multiple documents alongside leaders from Bahrain and Morocco before other world leaders approached the table in pairs to add their signatures. Secretary of State Marco Rubio praised Trump's vision, arguing that existing institutions have proven unable to act effectively in recent conflicts. Middle Eastern powers, including Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Qatar, and Bahrain, accepted invitations alongside Turkey, Pakistan, Hungary, Morocco, and several Central Asian republics. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had joined despite facing an international criminal court arrest warrant, and key European allies declined participation. Did you hear that? Key European allies that once respected the United States refused to participate. The United Kingdom cited concerns about Russia's potential involvement while Moscow continues its war in Ukraine. France rejected creating a new organization that could replace the United Nations, though it supports Trump's peace plan. Norway, Sweden, and Slovenia also turned down the invitations, with Slovenia warning the board's mandate could undermine the international order based on the UN Charter. Controversial leadership structures, Trump serves as indefinite chairman. Even after Trump gets out of office, he's still the chairman, potentially holding the position beyond his second presidential term. Yeah. The executive board includes his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, no shit, who previously suggested moving people out of Gaza to develop its waterfront property. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair's involvement sparked objections from Arab and Muslim states after his institute developed controversial Gaza plans, including a coastal resort. Other members include Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and World Bank President Ajay Banga. Expanded mandate beyond the original Gaza-focused. Trump originally conceived the Board of Peace to oversee Gaza's reconstruction following the 2-year war. I'm going to pause there. Do you get what this is? Did you see the people involved? It's not a Board of Peace. You might as well call it for what it really is. It's the Board of Make Me Money. That's really what it is. All of these people want to go into the Gaza Strip after Israel's done bombing and killing everybody, and the Palestinians are reduced to nothing. They'll want to go in there and rebuild the Gaza Strip with resorts, get their oil. You saw all the people who are players in this thing. You saw all the actors, and they're going to make money for themselves. This is what that's like the offshore oil well accounts from the Venezuela oil that's happening. The U.S. is not going to see a dime of that. Now, Trump has said, well, they're in offshore oil accounts, and I will distribute them back to the American people and to the Venezuela people as I see fit, as we see what they need. In other words, it's going to sit in my accounts while I earn millions and millions of dollars every day in interest, and I'm going to be a happy camper. Trump has set himself up to when he gets out of office, he's going to probably be a billionaire 3 times over. It is totally illegal when you're the sitting president, but nobody is going to do jack about it because they control the House and Senate. Now, when the Democrats get a hold of the House in midterms, which I'm sure they're going to do, you might be seeing a different tune starting to be sung. But again, they're going to be still stonewalled because the Republicans are still going to hold the Senate, and of course they'll stop anything the House tries to do. That's politics. But this is all BS. It's not a board of peace. It's a board of economic development and how much money can I make off of you people. That's really what it is, and you can't prove me different because you see the names of the players involved with this. So. Again, this is just crazy shit. It's crazy stuff. So, moving on, let's talk about something else that's going on here, and that is, of course, the Supreme Court. As you're well aware of, the Supreme Court this past week has been hearing different cases, specifically about tariffs. And also specifically about the Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook and whether Trump was justified in firing her. Well, for once in God's green earth, the Supreme Court, I think, is going to side with the Federal Reserve and tell Trump you can't fire Lisa Cook because the Federal Reserve is a separate entity over anything else that is controlled. And you cannot, by law, control interest rates just because you want to see lower interest rates. Again, Donald Trump thinks he's invincible. But Justice Brett Kavanaugh voiced concern during oral arguments on this past Wednesday that a Supreme Court case involving the Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook could erode the central bank's independence if the justices were to side with President Donald Trump on this case. Kavanaugh asked Solicitor General John Sauer, who argued on behalf of the administration about his position that Trump alone can decide what causes means when firing a Federal Reserve governor. That's your position. No judicial review, no process required, no remedy available, Kavanaugh said, describing it as a very low bar for cause that the president alone determines. Kavanaugh, a Trump appointee, by the way, added that it would weaken, if not shatter, the independence of the Federal Reserve. So true. So true. I wonder why. Why would that shatter the Federal Reserve? Well, we know why. We would have an economic crash if Donald Trump had his own cronies in there with the Federal Reserve, and you heard the word, lower the interest rates because I need to get better deals on my money, on my billions. I'm trying to borrow this, and I want you to lower interest rates so I can get a better deal. He doesn't think. You just can't do that. That's not how the world revolves. That's not what economics is all about. And anybody will tell you that. You cannot go around and just, have things set the way you want it on a day-by-day basis, The interest rate's at 5% for most favored loans. I need to borrow $14 billion for my hotel. So would you go in there and just bring them down a couple points for me, please, so my family can go out and build this hotel and get a better deal? You think I'm nuts? That's really why he wants to do that. This is where this guy's thinking is. So yeah, and of course they got to hear the Supreme Court's got to hear the things on the tariffs. They haven't ruled on that yet. Now that is going to be another bit of a stickier situation, about how they're going to rule on that. And I don't have a magic ball to see how that's going to go. And my last story for today on the Right Has Left for this particular podcast, we're going to bring it back home to Florida. We're going to talk about Matt Gaetz. You remember this guy? You remember this clown? Well, the Florida bar decided not to reprimand or disbar former U.S. Representative Matt Gaetz from a House Ethics Committee, which found substantial evidence he had sex with a 17-year-old. Again, Florida is filled with the good old boys network. And they sit there in Tallahassee just like the good old boy network with the Republicans that sit in Washington, D.C. with Trump. Well, they're down here too. This guy had sex with an underage minor, and he was using illegal drugs. But you know what? Pat him on the back. That's okay. We'll let you stay and let you keep going here. Just don't do it again, okay, Matt? It's embarrassing. So while he did all this, the 17-year-old, and shooting drugs and smelling drugs or taking up drugs up the nose, I don't know what the hell he's doing, but he had all, he did all this with disgraced Seminole County tax collector Joel Greenberg. Gets his attorney, Warren Lindsay, a Winter Park City commissioner, successfully argued it would be inappropriate and very bad precedent to discipline Gates based on a quintessential political document that contains hearsay allegations of largely unidentified witnesses. Still, a bar grievance committee informally chided Gates for his conduct as alleged in the congressional investigation report released in December 2024. As an attorney in the state, you are held to a higher standard, including expectations to uphold the legal profession's honor and public trust. Oh, no shit, wrote attorney Casey Press Waterhouse, chair of the bar's grievance committee, in an August 15th letter to Matt Gates. So yeah, you can, have relationships with an underage girl. You can snort cocaine up your nose. You can do all those things, and even though we know it's happened, we can't really prove that it happened. So we're just going to, pat you on the back and please don't do that again, Matt. But go ahead and do what you got to do here in the state of Florida. You're a good old boy. Sorry you got caught with all that, but just don't let it happen again. And his attorney, well, it's just all hearsay. It's not hearsay, For God's sakes, it happened. And just because you've got minors who will not publicly step forward and release their names because minors should be protected, because you don't have that, well, then by God, there's just nothing there then, is there? I swear to God, the corruption in this world is just unbelievable. I cannot believe the corruption that exists with people. The good old boy network, it still is very strong, and I just hope and pray that something happens with these Gestapo police that are running around, that you see in the media. It's sad, it's heartbreaking, especially when it affects women and small children. And they're innocent. These children, they didn't do anything, they're just there. And the way they're being treated and their parents being taken away is just God sad. So anyway, that is my edition of The Right Has Left. I'm Roy Garten. I hope you enjoyed this particular podcast. I look forward to your comments. And until next week, you try to have a good day. Until then, take care.